We are now on air.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Marek Magierowski. I have the honor to chair this meeting, the revolutionary hangout, and I would like to welcome the participants of this meeting, Mrs. Eva Zamrazilova from the Czech Republic, who is running for the European Parliament. She is from the ODS party, former member of the board of the Czech Central Bank. Mr. Davor Stier, a member of the European Parliament since 2013, former advisor, foreign policy advisor to the Croatian Prime Minister of Canada, Maroš Šefčovič, a Slovak diplomat and the current European Commissioner for Interinstitutional Relations and Administration. And we also have a pool of distinguished guests from Poland, Michał Kamiński, Civic Platform, who is the current member of the European Parliament, Krzysztof Iszkowski, who is running for the European Parliament from the U-Turn Party, and Witold Waszczykowski, Law and Justice, who is a former Deputy Foreign Minister. And I would like to start our conversation quite quickly because we've had a slight delay from one of the most hotly debated issues nowadays in Europe, namely the crisis in Ukraine, which has apparently laid bare all the shortcomings of the EU's foreign and security policy. Quite obviously, the most influential actors in Europe are playing their own commercial games with Russia, which has devastating effect on the notion of the European solidarity. Particular commercial interests prevail, whereas the so-called common values, so dear to every European political leader in peacetime, are visibly sidelined. Should we declare the European Union's foreign policy, common foreign policy, officially defunct? Is it dead? Mrs. Zamrazilova, please, what is your take?
About Ukraine?
Yes. Do you think that the European common foreign policy is dead?
Well, I'm afraid that the inability of the European leaders to have some common statement towards the problems on Ukraine just reflects the fact the situation that the European nations, European countries don't have common interests at all the events. I think that it only shows the diversity of Europe, which is artificially diminished. That's my view.
Thank you. Mr. Waszczykowski, as a former Deputy Foreign Minister, I think he has something interesting to say about the crisis in Ukraine, especially from the Polish perspective. Mr. Waszczykowski.
The fact is that we never had a common foreign policy of the European Union, but it doesn't mean that Europe is defenseless. There is another institution which is taking care of our security, which means North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. In this particular situation we have right now, in this crisis we have right now, we should avoid the situation where both institutions compete with each other. Both institutions supposed to cooperate with each other, also with the United States. So this is the role for the European Union right now, to support NATO, to support United States, searching for the solution of this crisis. The crisis, let me remind you, this is not a Ukrainian crisis. This is the crisis of Russian aggression against Ukraine, which is right now beginning the process of transformation of economy and democratization of the state. And both institutions like European Union and NATO and the United States especially, supposed to support this process of Ukrainian transformation, and supposed to put the pressure on Russia to stop interference in this process of transformation and democratization of Ukraine.
Well, I think there is also a division not only in the West, but also among the Eastern countries, which have always been quite unanimous in criticizing Russia's aggressive policy. But now we can hear that some countries are not so critical of Putin's aggression on Ukraine. Mr. Shevchevich, how do you see this situation from Brussels?
From Brussels and now especially from Slovakia, I think that of course what happened in Ukraine is very tragic. Not only loss of life, but of course the strong pressure on the developing democracies in the country, and of course nobody can tolerate the breach of international law and annexation of the part of another country. I really do believe that in the 21st century we will see that through this type of behavior you can actually change the borders ratified many times before an international agreement. What is, I think, the more important right now is to make sure that Europe stays united, that we are able to help Ukraine to overcome the current crisis, to help them financially. We know that there is already excise duties for Ukrainian exports to the European Union lifted, so this should bring 400 million euros to the Ukrainian budget. There was an agreement on 15 billion of euros of macro financial assistance. Again, 2 billion euros been already disbursed to help Ukrainians to stabilize the economy. But what is most important right now is that we would use all our tools we have to de-escalate the situation, to get Russian, Ukrainians, with the help of Europeans and Americans to talk to each other, because at first we need to de-escalate, to calm down the political situation, so then we can actually help Ukraine on its path towards Europe. We can help them with the transformation. Here I think that all of the countries, we have a unique experience because we also had to go through very difficult economic reforms, and I think that the best response to the current crisis would be when the Ukraine would overcome the situation and actually will become the democratic state where the people would live well, better than before.
Well, Mr. Kamiński, you have been cooperating quite closely with the Polish Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski lately, and you have also been traveling a lot in Ukraine, so you know that country very well. What do you think? What can Europe do to help Ukraine not only stop the Russian aggression, but also protect its territorial integrity in the long term? But also, what can Europe do to help Ukraine overcome the economic crisis, a very deep one, in which Ukraine finds itself now?
Thank you very much. But as you properly mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, the whole crisis in Ukraine is showing us the obvious shortcomings of the European foreign policy. But at the same time, paradoxically, this situation shows us that we need more united Europe, that we need a stronger cooperation, especially in such important fields like defense and the foreign policy. So what we can do to help Ukraine is, I think that first we should show Russia that there is a very strong opposition towards the Russian imperialism today, and Russia will pay a very high price for breaking the rules in the international policy, that Russia will pay the price for violating the integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. And we should draw the lessons from history, where today, obviously Europe, and unfortunately Poland in particular, we will have to pay a price for stopping Russia. But today, this price will be lesser than it will be in a couple of years. If you will compare it to the history, if you will compare it to Hitler's aggression against Germany's neighbors in 30s, we can see today that if we would, as Europe, if we would stop Hitler in 30s, we would not pay the price as high as we paid during the Second World War. So the price we will pay for stopping Russia will be probably quite high, especially in the economy. But on the other hand, it will be much better to stop Russia today than to face the next phases of the Russian aggression. Politically, so that's my first advice. We have to implement strong sanctions against Russia. My second advice is we have to support Ukraine to transform the society and the state into the more modern and into the more European standards. And I know Ukraine quite well, and unfortunately, I know that this country today far away from European standards. But the way we went through Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia shows us that it is possible. It is possible to transform the society, the economy, the state from the post-communism system into the system of a modern democracy, liberal democracy. So we should support Ukraine, we should train the people there, we should show them that there is a way they should go. This way is leading them to the West.
Well, I would like to ask Mr. Stier from Croatia, who is a newcomer in the European Union, what his view is on the countries and on the divisions inside of the European Union about the relationship with Russia, because there is a couple of countries which are not so willing to impose more and harsher sanctions on Russia, sanctions Mr. Kamiński had just mentioned. Mr. Stier, what do you think about the EU's relationship with Russia?
Well, certainly the invasion of Russia to Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea and the whole instability that has been now produced in the eastern and southern part of the country is without no doubt probably the biggest challenge to European security that we are facing, at least after the dissolution of the former Yugoslavia. And there, of course, we can also draw some historical experiences. We all remember the aggression of Slobodan Milosevic and a pattern of behavior that in certain aspects can be compared with the behavior of Vladimir Putin today. And we also remember the divisions within the European Union at that time and the inaction of the European Union that unfortunately allowed Milosevic to continue with the policy of aggression and destruction for quite a while. At the end, however, we also have to say that that terrible experience was in a way useful for the advancement of the common foreign and security policy of the European Union. It was clear the need to have a common foreign and security policy, and that was one of the lessons learned from the wars of the 90s. I will concur with what has been said before, that also this experience needs or actually stresses the need for a far more integrated European foreign policy. I think that it's also important to say this is a challenge for the West as a whole. We do need to have a strong link also with our American allies, but in that regard, we have to be also aware that the United States is in a way in a better position, especially when it comes to their energy independence for the European Union, but also for Russia. It would be really terrible to have a continuing escalation of violence in Ukraine. I think it's quite obvious that the de-escalation should be in the interest of both sides. Many people many analysts have pointed out what would be the negative consequences for some European countries and for the European economy as a whole. But I think that we need to stress as well that in the medium, especially in the long term, an escalation of violence will be quite detrimental to Russia as well. The policy of aggression of Vladimir Putin, in a way, has also made the Ukrainian society far more homogeneous and far more determined, even to pay the highest prices in order to defend its independence. When you have a nation united in such a way, even far bigger and stronger empires crumble. And I think that Moscow has experience of what had happened to the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. So I think that those are also valid elements that should be stressed, that in the long run it's in nobody's interest to escalate the tensions, and that Russia wants to de-escalate for its own national interests.
Okay. Mr. Uszkowski, you are representing a party which is regarded as the most pro-European party in Poland, so presumably you would like to defend the EU's common foreign policy. Please proceed to make your case.
Start with reminding you that the crisis in Ukraine started with very strong pro-Europeans on the rejection of agreement with the European, the protest on Maidan, and then resulted with overthrow of government. Says that outside of European Union there is a lot of what one could call a soft European power, and a lot of greater will for integration with the EU than in some countries inside the European Union. Now, as regards the Europe does need to have a common foreign policy, complete with possibilities of it is not going to happen anytime soon, but we would like to come back to the discussion Europe had in 1950s about we think it is still relevant, especially in global context when the United States have moved towards pacifism. So it's not to say against NATO and the alliance with the United States. It is to say that should be and should be in a possibility to deal with crises like this in Ukraine, like a crisis in Libya, without necessarily involving the Atlantic partner.
Okay. Now, the second part of our debate, I would like to devote it to the democratic processes in the European Union. For the first time in history, we are witnessing a real electoral race for the post of the European Commission President. This is apparently an attempt to make the European Union more democratic, more transparent, to boost its democratic credentials. However, the EU citizens don't seem to be very enthusiastic about the choice between Mr. Schulz and Mr. Juncker, who are the front runners in that race. What else should the European Union do to become more democratic and less detached from real daily problems of the EU citizens? Ms. Samazilova, please.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Well, I would start with 150 years old opinions of John Stuart Mill, whom I consider to be a really great economist. He wrote in his on liberty thesis that that the differentiation in Europe, the differentiation of European people, of European nations, is the factor that leads Europe to higher growth than the rest of the world. And now I feel that all the unification, all the uniformity which is driven by the European standards somehow harms the potential of Europe. And so I think that less centralization and less regulation could help very much. But of course, the basic regulations should be really kept and should apply without any exception. And as an economist, I think that for Europe is very important and could be very, very good to proceed the treaty with the United States on free trade. I think this could very much help boost growth, on both sides of Atlantic, and I think that it could also help to offset some of the problems that may be provoked by the instability in Russia. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kamiński, what is your view?
Oh, thank you very much. I think that we have to face one very simply truth about the European politics today, that there is, maybe unfortunately, but there is no such thing like a European demos. There is no one single European society. However, the differences between the states in the United States of America are quite significant. There is obviously a difference between, let's say, Wisconsin and then Florida, and but there is the one American demos. The people in many states of the United States of America, when they are voting, they are choosing the American parties because of their views about America as such, as a United States of America. Today, in the European elections, in every possible country, from old or new Europe, it is France or Germany or UK or Poland or Czech Republic, the people are voting for the particular parties in the European elections because they are either opposing and supporting the government or the opposition in their own countries. I don't believe that there is a huge group of voters in Europe who are voting, who are taking part in European elections because of any particular European policies they are supporting or opposing. They are voting because of the national reasons. How we can deal with this problem is very difficult to answer, because there is no political will on left, on the at the same time on the right side in the European political parties to create a real political parties in Europe, because there is the differences between the countries are still so huge that it is simply impossible to make a common list in the European elections and to make a common election campaign. And we can see that, in particular, when we are watching the competition between Schulz and Juncker. It's not a kind of a campaign we know from USA or from Poland or UK or Germany, when two contenders are trying to compete with each other about certain policies. It is still, we are very far from the common European demos. I don't want to judge the situation, if it's good or wrong, but I just want to state the fact that we are very far away from the European demos, from the European single society. We are still voting in European elections because of the national reasons, and those reasons are rather connected with the internal politics in the particular countries than with the European politics.
Thank you. Mr. Stier, I would like to ask you whether the Croatians are still happy being a part of the European Union, or they are already a little bit disappointed seeing that the democratic processes in the European Union are not so rosy as you might have expected.
Well, I think that the overall support of the Croatian society for the European Union is still solid and is still above 50%. So we had the referendum only in 2012, and 66% of the citizens that participated in that referendum voted for. But it's also true that there is a sense of disappointment. You have seen that already in the by-elections that we have when we had our elections for the European Parliament last year, since we had to elect our MEPs on that occasion, and the turnout was really very, very low. So there is this effect of disappointment, but it's mostly a disappointment, I would say, with the way that the authorities in Croatia has been handled the entry into the European Union, and probably were not prepared to just show the best of Croatia in the first months of membership. that disappointment of the citizens will also play a role, and you can say this is a domestic or a national issue that will certainly figure prominently in the will of the voters on the 25th of May. However, I think that going further into comparisons of the situation in the European Union and the United States is just comparing two things that are certainly different. The history is different. We are a continent of nations, of national states, and obviously that the national and domestic issues are still very dominant. However, I think that the election now of the President of the Commission, this competition between Jean-Claude Juncker and Martin Schulz and the other candidates is a good step forward. Of course, the second step, in my view, should be also to respect the will of the voters, and then to apply a rule that is very simple but very effective. I think that the European Union should be big on the big issues and small on the smaller ones. So it would be a way that the citizens of the European Union understand and better support the efforts of the European Union, where they see, for example, determination of the EU ongoing on developing, for example, the digital economy, on taking measures of, that really apply to the investment in new technologies that can foster the competitiveness of our economy, of new technologies that can bring jobs. This is something that, of course, European citizens can sense, and where the European Union has a big role. On smaller issues that should be, by the principle of subsidiarity, left to the national authorities or to the local authorities, when the European Union starts to introduce itself in that, it gets entangled in a jungle of regulations that are not necessary. So I think that that principle, being big on the big issues and smaller on the smaller ones, is a way to also bring the EU closer to the heart of the European citizens.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Šefčovič, you are representing the European Commission. So you are not only the EU citizen, but you also have the tools to make the democratic processes in Europe more transparent. I would like to ask you, what can the European Commission do to make us feel more comfortable living in the European Union, and to make our decisions stronger and more influential? For example, on May 23rd and 25th, when the European elections will be held. What can the European Commission, with you as one of the commissioners, do to make Europe more democratic?
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a common task for all of us. Of course, we have to communicate better in simpler terms. We also need the help from national level to explain the European decisions and to explain to the citizens that all the decisions which are adopted in Brussels and not by Brussels, that every single minister is part of it, that the decisions are approved by the European Parliament, where every member state has its own MEPs. And what I think is even more relevant than some of the colleagues already referred to it is to bring up the topics which are important for the people. I think that in coming years it's very clear this would be how to accelerate economic growth, how to tackle the unemployment, what to do for the young people. And here I have to say that I very much appreciate the format of the speakers invited, because the Central Europe is becoming a very important economic region. I was just very much surprised when I saw the last statistics that only Visegrad 4 countries are exporting together more than the UK. So we somehow become already G7 economy. And I think that we have to work even more on these issues and slowly to move from iron to silicon. I think we have a lot of good examples for that. We have very promising a software hub being created in Bratislava without so far particular help from the EU or the government. We have well-known software companies like ESET and CIGIG, and I know there's such a company in Czech Republic, in Poland. And therefore, what we can do from the European level is to channel all the necessary investments we have in our 7 years budget to these new promising technologies, and to adjust also the training so that the young people are more compatible with the demands on the labor market, that we would have better informatics in the school, that we would have better IT technicians, and we can actually combine the classical iron industry with a new one. I mean, we know how the car industry needs new high-tech people. We know how the classical industry, like the steel industry, needs also new technologies to be employed. And as I see how successful been the 10 years after we joined the EU, where the Slovakia and Poland actually made most of it, we grew very, very fast. So that I think that we have the recipe. So we know how to go through difficult transformation, how to channel the money into the right places, and I think that we would have another chance to do it in the next decade. And if you allow me, because the discussion is very interesting, we started a little bit later on. I just would need to thank you all because I need to move to another meeting. But it's really honor and pleasure for me to be in this first ever Google Hangout on the Central European level. I think that we should continue this tradition. I very much like the choice of the countries, choice of the speakers, and I'm sure that we can share a lot together, and we can actually broadcast it to the young people, because I believe that they will be very much interested in this type of communication, and actually to reach out a little bit also through using these modern social media platforms, because this is how we can attract the young people to the European topic, to the European discussion. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me. I wish you all the success. I believe that most of us, we will see somewhere in Brussels, within the Parliament or in the Commission, and I would like to wish you good luck, and all of us a little bit better turnout in the European elections than last time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner, and I hope to meet you someday in another hangout, maybe. And I would like to stress that, talking about innovations, we are right now contributing to improving democracy in Europe as well, organizing this hangout. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Mr. Šefčovič. Let's go now to move to Mr. Iškovský. Mr. Šefčovič was talking a lot about economy and the economic factor in boosting the EU's democratic credentials. Do you think that the recovering economy is the most important factor in building up the democratic environment in Europe?
We hear the last part of your question, but I would like to start with drawing
I picked up on what Mr. I will try to repeat this. I picked up on what Mr. Šefčovič said about the economy and economic innovations in Europe, that this is one of the most important factors. If the economy recovers, then the EU citizens will feel more comfortable, and they will begin to believe in Europe as a political project again. What do you think about that?
I'm not that convinced, because they will consider it something natural, with well, either the national government or the local government or whoever that good results of European economy will result with a credit for the European Union. Mr. Kamiński deficit or the lack of European demands. I would like to point that it is actually a kind of well, from Mr. Kamiński's perspective, it is because people do not feel they belong together. Therefore, Europe cannot be really democratic. The problem is that the way of making people feel that they do belong together is to show them that they really have an impact on each other's lives, and that they really need to make decisions. That if European Parliament is given greater powers, if there is a classical democratic mechanism as the one which is well known and well understood by European citizens from their own national settings, then based on the consciousness of common interests and of being a part of a common political project. So I would rather stress the necessity of institutional reform rather than the necessity of well, obviously, economy is also very important, but it is not only through economy that we are going to make Europeans more united.
Thank you, Mr. Waszczykowski. I would like you to address two issues. First of all, that notion of the European demos Mr. Kamiński mentioned. I believe you're not very enthusiastic about that prospect of creating a European demos. And the other thing is, talking about innovations, Europe is seemingly losing the war in this field with America, but also with some Asian countries, China and South Korea, for instance. What do you think Europe can do to catch up with with the leaders in this particular field?
Yes, thank you for these two questions. The first one relates, of course, to the problem of democratization of the European Union as a structure. And the answer how to democratize the European Union is simple: to expand the discussion on the future development of the European Union. So far, the discussion in the European Union is hijacked by those politicians who prefer to discuss only more politicization of the European Union and the more federalist approach. This is idea which is scary for a number of people, for a number of citizens of the European Union. They prefer to see the European Union as an institution which facilitates the states to develop itself, not as an institution which is taking prerogatives from national governments away to the bureaucrats in Brussels. So the answer is for democratization is to broaden the scope of the debate and to include in this debate not only the problem of more federalization, but also the problem how to keep the union as a structure which facilitates development of national states, how to make the European Union more democratic, more open for deregulation, for freedoms, less quotas, more openness. So these are the scenarios and these are the recipes which are provided also by some other politicians, that they're supposed to be part of the debate, not only the problem of federalization, more politicization. And this is also the link to the second problem you mentioned: how to make the European Union more innovative, how to force the European Union to deal effectively with countries like Russia, China, and others. This is also the problem which is connected also to the first issue which we discussed, the common foreign policy, which is lacking right now in European Union. If we created such norms and standards for ourselves in the European Union, let's try to impose these standards also in the relationship between European Union and outside countries like Russia and China. And this is the problem for the common policy of the European Union. Doesn't mean that the European Union is supposed to compete also with the United States, but has to deal with countries like China and Russia and others on the economic ground. And this is a lot of things to do, how to force those countries from the outside of the European Union to stick to our standards, to deal with us according to our norms, which we think are better, and create more transparent economy, create more transparent cooperation. And finally, if you ask me about innovation, because time is running out, innovation, well, I think that we're supposed to come back to the strategy of reindustrialization in Europe. A number of countries, some years ago, we decided to get rid of hard industry, thinking that we will benefit developing just services like financial services and some things like that. Well, we lost a lot of jobs, and those countries we decided to keep industry survived this situation, the crisis situation, slightly better than the other countries which decided to go away from industrialization. So sorry, but time is running out, so I tried to cover a few things in the same time.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Zamrazilova, I think this is one of the most intriguing questions we should answer. Is it compatible, in your opinion, to reindustrialize Europe, as Mr. Waszczykowski is proposing, and to digitalize it? Because I think these are the two ways the European Union or Europe should develop. On the one hand, a return to the roots, and on the other hand, leap forward to the digital age. What is your opinion?
Yeah, well, I must say I agree really very much with Mr. Waszczykowski about what he said about reindustrialization. Yeah, I think it's not the question of the Europe as such. It's a question. The question could be rather, what can the countries do to promote innovation, etc., etc. And I am not perfectly informed about the situation in Poland, Slovakia, or Croatia, but I know that in our country there is something I would call as the inflation of university education of non-technical areas of study. Children don't like mathematics, neither do their parents, and we have hundreds or thousands of sociologists, politologists, economists, financial experts, and so on. And I really think that we need more people involved in technical education on the secondary level and on the university level. This really could help to in the Czech Republic, there is not necessarily the re-industrialization, but the upgrade to higher levels of the industrial development. So this is one of my points. And of course, if we Central European countries do attract foreign direct investments, as the Czech Republic really did at the end of the 90s and the first half of the last decade, the attraction and some investment attractions should be granted only to really highest technical know-how and really the most advanced companies, because we had attracted a lot of FDI, for instance, on the middle level of manufacturing and so on. So this is, I think, from my side for this question.
Yeah, Mr. Waszczykowski, Central and Eastern Europe is still a very attractive part of this continent for foreign investors, mainly because we have still a very well-educated labor force. But on the other hand, we are seeing now a very dangerous phenomenon which is taking place in Western Europe, a rising tide of xenophobic resentments in Western societies, which rekindles the prospect of a new, very dangerous division in Europe. Populist politicians in France, in the UK, in the Netherlands, and in some other Western European countries are successfully capitalizing on these fears. How should this problem be dealt with?
Well, obviously, getting economy in a better shape will help a lot. Because a lot of those, if we look in the past, those xenophobic sentiments, which are not new in Europe, have always been economic difficulties. But other than that, we also should start thinking to citizens, not only by talking to them how how good it is for them, but also by making it easier to understand and easier to handle. We should think about federal European structure, because in fact we do live in a federal European structure, and the level of between our nations is so big that we cannot really ignore it. Unfortunately, the mainstream European politicians from the center right try to in which the nation states are still the most important factor, the most important player, and this narrative is taking all the credits for good things to national governments and putting all blame on the European Union. The recent debate was quite clearly mentioned by Martin Schulz. This is something which we should avoid in the future. There are good things about national governments, and there are bad things about national governments, just as there are good and bad things about European institutions and European Union. Only by stressing and perhaps creating some level of mutual confidence and a sense of belonging together can we overcome those xenophobic sentiments. Or perhaps the way to go is by learning it the hard way. Well, perhaps let the United Kingdom get out from the European Union, and in 3 years, the English or British, there is still United Kingdom and Great Britain, realize that Europe, in fact, was not that bad.
Thank you. Mr. Stier, do Croatians experience the same reluctance on the part of the Britons and French? Do you feel that there is still that, at least a mental division, of that border, that frontier, and the mentality of many Western Europeans, that Croatia, Poland, the Czech Republic, and other Eastern European countries are still not the part of the same entity? What do Croatians think about that?
Well, yes, there is a feeling, and of course you have to bear in mind that a new country, for example, will still have, unlike other countries in Central Europe, for Croatia will still have, for the next probably 7 years, closed most of the labor markets in the Western European countries. This is something that, of course, in 2004, with the Big Bang, also the newcomers at that time had to go through. Now is Croatia's turn. But this is, of course, something that you have to bear in mind when you analyze the situation and how the Croatian citizens feel about that. But I think that all in all, and in all fairness, we also have to say that we have seen that Croatia has the opportunity now to play, of course, a bigger role in Europe, and that the experiences of, for example, Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, or Hungary is quite important for us. Look, just as Poland has never been more influential in modern history than after joining the European Union, and you see of course, an increased standard level for the Polish citizens. This is something that is very frequently, you can read articles about that in the Croatian press, and that is bringing hope also to the Croatian citizens, that at the beginning these frontiers will be there, but if we cooperate with other Central European countries, if we have a sense of purpose, we can also be a force for good within the European Union, and also then take our place in Europe.
Okay. Mr. Waszczykowski, talking about the influence of different countries in Europe, I believe you are not so sure that Poland has never been more influential than nowadays.
Well, this is exactly something to discuss, to debate right now, because we have a foreign policy right now which is oriented toward just being part of the European Union, being part of NATO. This is not very ambitious policy. till 2007, 2008, we used to have much more ambitious policy. It was a policy to expand the European Union, expand NATO toward East, to accept and to support the ambitious policy of the other countries located towards the East from Poland, to promote these ambitions to be part of European Union and NATO. Accepting the Eastern Partnership program by this Polish government right now, it was departure from this policy, because Eastern Partnership program never gave these countries the perspective to be part of European Union. So now we have the problems because some of these countries like Belarus, like Armenia, like Azerbaijan decided from the very beginning not to participate in the Eastern Partnership program. Some others with problems, they still try to get through these difficulties and stay as close as possible to the European Union. Also, our policy towards Western partners were quite questionable in Poland. Well, I believe that we have quite anti-American policy right now because this government decided to actually postpone the development of missile defense. Now, because we have a crisis, so the government came back to this idea and is asking the United States, some other NATO countries to speed up some kind of a defense facilities in central part of Europe. We have to question also the policy of this government towards European Union, towards Germany. But these are our own domestic problems, not for the discussion among the foreigners, of course, and outside of Poland. So please allow me to criticize my government, but to criticize here in Warsaw, not in front of our colleagues from other countries.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Zamrazelova, lastly, there has been various attempts to create a coalition of Eastern European countries, which would be much stronger inside the European Union than the single actors from this part of Europe. Do you think is it possible to return to this idea in the future?
Well, I think that what really is mostly important for us is the proceed in the process of convergence, both in nominal and real term levels. The economic development levels, as well as the wage levels and the levels of living standards, are still much lower than in our West European counterparts. And I think it's our homework to raise our productivity of labor, to modernize our infrastructure, etc. It's our goal to become real partners for our West European counterparts, not just have the role of being some subcontractors or so. So this is my just purely economic response.
Okay, thank you very much. We have also two questions from our Twitter users. Mr. Jakub Sushka is asking you, all participants of this Hangout, what do you think about Guy Verhofstadt's idea, the United States of Europe? Is it possible to create and to live in the United States of Europe? Mr. Ryszkowski.
Yeah, well, if we don't live in the United States of Europe, there is a question where we are going to live at all. So that question of closer integration, the question of the United States of Europe, is a response to a global phenomena. Europe is declining in terms of population. It's going at a rather slow pace. Whereas the number of people who live globally is increasing. So this means that Europe, where it was about 20% of world population and about 50% of world GDP, is going to play a much smaller role in the next decade to keep possibilities of protecting our interests and of having any relevance on the global scale and on the global scene. We need to act together. And obviously, there are experience of some differences of interest between European countries, and still not very high degree of confidence among between governments and between people. But still, if we look in general, Europeans have the same have more in common than they do not. We want to defend something what we consider the European lifestyle, which is a good work-life balance. We want to defend a clear environment, and we want to have a very visionary environmental policies, because we believe that it is something that is going to make our lives better, or the lives of our children in several decades better. We want to live in a world in which democracy is the main game in the town. So, and the only way to promote all those things is by being a strong, credible actor on the global scene. And the United States of Europe is simply for that. It is for having a common foreign and security and defense policy. It is about having a strong currency which will compete with US dollar as the main reserve currency of the world. And it is also about having enough economic clout to put the issues on the agenda of the trade talks. And this, the last element which I mentioned is at large.
Okay, Mr. Stier, you are from a country which was a part of a United States of Yugoslavia, and that marriage didn't end very happily. It ended in a bloody mess, actually. What do you think? Do you like the idea of the United States of Europe?
Well, definitely do not and cannot compare the European Union with Yugoslavia, because it was actually two different type of issues. Yugoslavia, unfortunately, was a state, was a federation, and it was destroyed when one of the nations wanted to impose its will to the others. So if you want to compare Yugoslavia, it's more comparable to the Soviet Union. The European Union is a different issue, and I think that there are two extremes here in the debate. One is the thesis that the European Union, after this crisis, will disintegrate, will fall apart. That you can see that in the referendums, for example, that could be organized in the United Kingdom, etc. I don't think that is going to happen. I think that the European Union will remain. There are many political, economic, and other reasons for that. And the other extreme for me is to say that the European Union will become something like the United States. It's a different history. As I said, it's a different fabric of the societies in our continent. The national state is still very important and embedded, but that is not precluding more European integration, having a more effective and assertive European policy, both on political and economic issues. I think that European citizens are also, in this time of crisis, searching for the soul of Europe, for those issues that are binding us together. What are the common roots that are common for Slovakians, for the Czechs, for Croats, or for Germans and Spaniards? And here we have, of course, the Judeo-Christian tradition that is there. And you see that going back to that is important in order to bring people together. So I think that the European Union is far more than just an economic area, than an economic bloc, but I do not see that at least not in the foreseeable future, that the European Union will become something like the United States.
Yeah. Mr. Waszczykowski, your party has always been supporting the so-called Europe of nations, so I suppose you oppose the idea of the United States of Europe, don't you?
Well, I think that for the next several years, this is a very utopian idea. and quite dangerous, because this is very undemocratic, unjust idea. To create the United States of Europe, we're supposed to create some kind of a federal structure, and the question mark is by whom this federal structure will be ruled, will be led. What are the rules? How we can find the democratic instruments to elect those who are supposed to rule such a United States of Europe? So far, we do not have this kind of instruments. So that's my opinion. Is to better stick to the more democratic structure of European Union, which is supporting development, which is facilitating development of nation states, which is trying to deregulate the problems, not to make more rules, more not to impose more restrictions. So that's my recipe for the next development of the European Union. It's supposed to be an institution which is part of the bigger architecture, security architecture, together with NATO, as I said, together with the United States. And slowly, step by step, such an institution may spread the norms and standards of Europeans around these institutions, may attract them to join. So this is the scenario for the next years, not the scenario of building United States of Europe.
Mrs. Zamrazilova, what do you think about the United States of Europe? We know what President Klaus thinks about that idea, but I would like to hear your view too.
Well, I don't know precisely Mr. Klaus' arguments, but I will really put mine on the table. Well, I agree that with the previous speaker that this is not democratic either at the moment. Well, to wake up one morning as a citizen of the United States of Europe, it's really a nightmare for me. I think that if the development should gradually and naturally go towards the United States of Europe, first the governments must ask their citizens if they really agree. It's the democracy, and it wasn't a question in the referendums before the EU entry. And I have to come back to the basics. The free movement of goods, services, labor, and capital doesn't really work yet, hasn't been working yet. And I think unless this basic idea is fulfilled, we don't have to go farther in the political or fiscal or political unification. That's my point.
Thank you very much. And the last question from one of our Twitter users, a question which is of utmost importance for Poland, but also for other countries of this region. Mr. Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, has recently proposed the so-called energy union. Is it possible to create an energy union in Europe? And I would like you to answer this question briefly because we are running out of time. Mr. Stier, what do you think about the energy union?
Well, I do support that. I think that the first building block is, of course, to have an energy vertical actually line from the Baltic to the Adriatic Sea, building, for example, the LNGs in the Baltic and the Adriatic. That's something that will bring to Central Europe more energy independence and diversification, and this is something that should be also applied for the entire European Union. So, yes, my thoughts go in that direction as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Waszczykowski.
Well, I think it's not a very realistic idea. We have our own homework both in Poland and the European Union. In the European Union, there is a whole set of regulation on energy which are not implemented, which are not imposed on our partners from outside of the European Union. So let's start implementing these standards, these regulations, in relationship, for instance, between the European Union and Russia. And the second, as I said, we do have our own homework at Poland, which is not done, which is not implemented. So in such a way, if Prime Minister Tusk has a very messy situation, energy messy situation in Poland, how can he be a viable partner, realistic partner for the other countries in Europe? The third problem is that a number of, especially Western countries, they have already a good relationship with Russia, good enough to buy, for instance, gas much cheaper than some other countries. And so I think this relates to Germany, for instance. This will be very difficult to convince them to create the whole common policy to buy energy, to buy gas, because in such a way it could be the expense of a price hike and will be not beneficial for them.
Mr. Szkowski, do you think that the bigger countries of the European Union will not support this idea?
No, that was a question for me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The idea is good because generally it is about bargaining together with Russia and about developing the grid of energy, the electrical grid and the grid of gas pipelines. And I don't see any reason why the largest member states of the European Union shouldn't like it, because even if they are in a better bargaining position right now than smaller countries like Poland or Slovakia, still making deals with suppliers of gas and oil together gives you even more of bargaining power. So you can buy this gas in Russia or anywhere else at even lower prices, even if your prices right now are quite low compared to those of other member states. But in any case, the energy union is a very short-term solution. It is a solution of the problem we are experiencing now, or it is an answer to the fears of the current Polish government that Russia is not reliable, and therefore we need to either have alternative sources of energy, or we need to have a stronger cooperation with our European partners. But it is something which is what can solve the problem in the perspective of independence in terms of energy sources is means that all energy used in Europe will be produced in Europe, and we know how we can make it, how we can achieve it. The way to go is to embark on what the Germans are calling the Energiewende, so the development of renewable sources of energy, which obviously right now they are not very reliable, they're not very, they're quite costly. But if we look at technology from 20 years ago and today, we know that the progress can be really fast. So if we start a strategic program of basing European economy and renewable sources of energy right now, in 20 years we can have something which will be much better than the energy union. That means real independence from anyone in the world.
Mrs. Zamrazilova, do you think that Europe will become independent energetically from the rest of the world in the future?
Very shortly. Exactly. The idea of energy union is a typical example of how European politicians react to problems that emerge. I would leave the energy policy to the experts, and I think this should not be solved by politicians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I have to say it has been a very intriguing experience, the first hangout in my life, and I think in your life as well. I hope we will have the possibility to repeat this experience in the future. Thank you very much. Eva Zamrazilova from the Czech Republic, Davor Stier from Croatia, Krzysztof Iszkowski and Witold Wachikowski from Poland, and Michał Kamiński from Poland as well, and Maros Šefčovič, who had to leave us a little earlier. Thank you very much. Many thanks to all our viewers and listeners and Twitter users. Thanks to Google and to 300Polityka, 300Polityka PL. Thank you very much, and see you and hear from you in the future. Bye-bye.
Thank you.